Yeah, man. I mean, we've all got kids, right? So, I have 3 kids, 2 sons, and a daughter, and I'm just like anybody else, trying to get them interested in reading and everything. And we just started noticing, they say, I think it might be Lewis advice, although on Substack, every quote is a C.S. Lewis quote. But they say that, he got mad and just said, we're going to have to write the kind of books that we want to read. And I think Frank and I kind of fell into that. And I know I've seen you doing similar stuff with your books that you've been writing and working on. Is I went out there to go get some books for my kiddos and trying to base that off of their interests and what excites them and what they are willing to read. And man, I was just striking out, and finding that if I wanted to find something that was interesting to them, that got them going, that got their imagination going, and that I was willing to put in front of them, I had to go back and back into my own personal back catalog of books from kind of when I was growing up, which a lot of the books that I read when I was growing up were books from a long time ago too. So I just found that there was this huge gap in juvenile fiction, especially for boys. And this is a subject that will light Substack up anyway when you talk about this, because a lot of people disagree. But I'll just speak from my point of view. You can go out there, you can find a lot of stuff that speaks to girls, that speaks to young girls' points of view, that gets my daughter excited to read. If I try and find something that doesn't just immediately glaze my son's eyes over, it's pretty difficult. Now, if I go back, like I said, my background, where I come from on this thing, and one of the things that started the Based Boys kind of essays was I was basically just pulling from. In fact, I would always email my mom when I wrote one and say, "Hey, look, I wrote another email about some of the books on your shelf," because she has all these books still kind of on her shelf that they introduced me to when I was young. And man, these were all just stuff that I just would find in used bookstores, just old stuff that used to be the stock and trade for young guys. Used to be, if you wanted to get your young guy reading something, you'd give him, what did we do for Based Boys? I talked about landmark books, which are nonfiction, but these really incredible history book series for young men. Your Hardy Boys, your Tom Swift, your Jules Verne, your Robert Heinlein, your G.A. Henty is a really old pick that I champion because he's unfortunately not as well known anymore. I mean, Frank and Phil, what am I missing, man? But all these books, they are written from, in our opinion, a fundamentally different perspective on what young men, number one, want and what makes them excited, and number two, what they should want. And I find that when I stick this stuff in front of my, 7, almost 8-year-old son, he'll read it, even if it's above his, suggested reading level. And sometimes he'll kind of poke at it and I'll have to encourage him or whatever. But he will stick with this stuff way longer than he sticks with stuff that I feel talks down to him or tries to kind of put him in this box of, well, this is what the kids like nowadays. And so that's kind of where it came from, is we said, look, I can go find all this stuff in used bookstores and online all day, but who out there is thinking and writing from this perspective now? And Frank has been kind of spearheading this for a couple years now, of just gathering this merry band of misfits together on the internet of guys who, we think like this, we write this way anyway. And we're finding that there's a growing market for this of people, parents and aunts and uncles and stuff who want to be able to provide this stuff for the kids in their life. And they're just looking around Barnes & Noble, same as me, not really seeing it.
Yeah, you're scratching where I itch. My boys are now 6 and 4. And we know it's become like a thing for me. Every time I'm in a bookstore or the library, I'm just looking at what's presented out on the shelves, And I honestly, like you mentioned, it's like the G.A. Henty, that's something that you put on my radar. I had never heard of him. I doubt you could even find G.A. Henty in a library. But even the books that you can find are very unappealing to boys. Zach, one of the things that you had highlighted in your piece, like whenever this is brought up, it could just be like, oh, we have to get boys to read. So like they don't read and we need to find a way to get them to do that. Which I think is a perfectly noble cause, but it does kind of whiff of like, so then they could be good lawyers or something like that someday. And I think what you emphasize is like something a bit of a higher calling. Well, like there should be, like we want to inspire, like there should be like escapism or imagination. We want to like instill wonder in these boys. And I think what you're saying is maybe that's less, that's more of a appeal rather than like just getting them to read, which is fine too. Like I think that's perfectly reasonable, but maybe say a little bit about the idea behind that, like the sense of wonder that you think could be instilled in these boys' books.
Yeah, it's just, I think it's just selling dudes short. I mean, like, there's nothing that a little guy likes more than just grabbing a book and poring over it. And I say this as we're not a Luddite home. My kids have a Switch and I play video games with them all the time. I love video games. I'm kind of anti this whole like video games are juvenile take. Like I'm good. Like it's okay. The kids they have their screen time. It's all good. And yet I can still get them to sit down with a book. It's just got to be the right kind of book. And I think this whole take that like, oh, boys won't read unless you pander to them. Boys won't read unless you talk down to them, unless you bring it all down to this really low level and make it really candy-like kind of fair. I just don't see it, man. The stuff that gets my son excited is the same stuff that got me excited when I was his age. It's competency fodder for young men. When you're 8 years old and, my oldest is the one I usually think of. My youngest is not quite there yet with all that. He's getting read too quite a bit. But when you're 8 years old, man, the world is kind of a scary place. And there's lots that is intimidating to you. And you're still learning about you don't feel like you can handle any challenge that you're faced with. So when I stick, nice big glossy Tintin comic, the old Belgian artist comic, just one of my favorites. And when I stick that in front of him and he's got a image in front of him of an 18 or 19-year-old young man who's incredibly competent, maybe in a goofy way, but who cares? He's buying, tickets on a steamer to go over to Africa to solve this world issue, to shoot at this guy. It fills something in his little heart that he needs, which is a picture of, in the future, it's possible for me to get to a place where I could meet the world on these terms and in this way. And I want to be filling his life with that material that's aspirational, that wants to lift him up and challenge him and push him, rather than, and I'm going to say this, with some charity, I hope, but, I just personally, I know we kind of mentioned this maybe even on the Men's Adventure podcast that we did, Frank. I just, I don't want to Diary of a Wimpy Kidify the poor dude.
Correct. Yeah. 100%.
Like he's right. It's like he already feels that way sometimes in his heart. He doesn't need to be told, yeah, that's who you are and you should kind of hang out there and be safe. He needs to be told, come on, man, what's the worst that could happen? Mm-hmm. And that was very much, the ethos that I was, given coming up. My parents, they're the way they figured, it was like, look, if it's a book, it can't hurt you that bad. We had different standards for some other material, and I'm pretty similar in my house, man. I don't let my kids watch just any movie or whatever, but on books, I'm kind of like, you know what, you'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And so when I was younger, I was reading, Scouting on Two Continents and Peter Capstick's, crazy, insanely violent hunting stories and all this stuff at a pretty young age, because that was the stuff that was interesting to me, that I was testing myself, thinking about the world and thinking, could I measure up in that world? And so that kind of, I think inspiration is one word for it, but to me, it's about competence. It's about portraying a world that he can step into as a young man. And I think to me, that's the stuff that you see young guys just grab naturally. Even out of the current lineup of stuff, I don't want to dog all, of all modern stuff.
Same.
I noticed that my son goes to a lot of modern stuff and he picks out your Redwalls, your even How to Train Your Dragon novels he's reading now. Why?
Okay.
Because these are still portraying a world in which a young person can be faced with challenges, surmount them, try hard, engage in conflict. It's the same kind of thing. And so we're just trying to pattern in a lot of ways what we write against these things that I think were such an encouragement to me growing up, and I want to just kind of see that tradition carried on.
Hey, Frank, I've heard you talk about like the market for short stories before, and you've given some explanations as to why that sort of dried up. Zack just said something about video games. And I think maybe the rebuttal that a lot of people would have, and I kind of get this, would be like, well, it's because boys play video games. Like, video games are the art form of our time, and that is where the kind of cultural cachet is with boys. So I sort of agree with that. And I think the question would be like, in terms of market, it's just like, how niche is this? Are we just talking about homeschool moms here or like, or if there's something more, and that could just be enough, by the way. There's plenty of homeschool moms out there. But what do you think about like the market for boys' books? On the one hand, you could just say, well, nobody likes boys anymore, so big publishers have gone away from that. But you can also say there's probably some reason for that. Video games being one of them. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I have several. I think to the original point that you were making, we're in the age of video games. And to Zach's credit too, like, I'm a big video game player myself. Like, I've got two nephews. The oldest is 11, and the youngest will be turning 9 in August. They used to live with us during the whole COVID pandemic, and they're like a second set of sons for me, as I'm one of the more prominent male figures in their life. So I think of them because they're very much, they kind of cling to video games in an, albeit maybe not as as healthy as a habit should be formed for them, but they're also interested in books. And I think it's kind of, to borrow a phrase from Harlan Ellison, who's kind of my model figure for short stories, it's kind of horsepucky to just kind of dismiss the idea that, well, because they love video games so much, trying to like bring them away from the controller and into the world of literature, albeit short literature or a novel or a novella, what have you, like there's room in your head for both. And there's more opportunity, I think, nowadays, because traditional publishing has abandoned boys. I think we could say that, quite state that fact plainly. I think there's such an opportunity now for small presses, for small publishers like ours, like, the anthologies that we're putting out there, which, by the way, the byline of that is thrilling stories of adventure and wonder. I mean, that's kind of like what we're aiming for. And I think with boys around that age, that middle grade age, that's where we have to kind of meet them. We have to address the fact that, yeah, video games are definitely the more dominant medium for that age group. Yeah, but so what? I think there's definitely opportunity to kind of introduce them, albeit slowly, to alternative forms. Like, hey, here's some books about muscular Celtic fantasy, which is one of the stories that we have in our books, written by James Caron, a pulp, pipe, and poetry partner. I think there's room for that, and I go back to Andy, what you had mentioned in my introduction, that I wrote the pulp work ethic, and that kind of took, I don't know, putting my name out there is something I want to say about it, but I think it introduced individuals to the idea that, oh wow, there's actually life, in literature, before the great body of works, the great, the Hemingways, the Steinbecks of the world. Like, there's Edgar Rice Burroughs, there's John Carter of Mars, there's Tarzan, there's all these books here that we're in a more dominant way of the culture because everyone was reading more and people were reading especially more short fiction. But I think it's easy for us to say, oh, well, video games that's it, folks, like, pack your bags, we just have to kind of move on there. I think this is kind of a war we're launching, a little bit hyperbolic perhaps to some folks when I say that, but this is really like a war for boys' attention. And I think if we just leave that as like, well, this is the state of things with video games, we'd be doing our sons a disservice. When my son was about 3 weeks old, I immediately started reading to him every single night. I never let a moment pass as a father to read to my son, whether it was stories from the Bible, whether it was the Wizard of Oz stories, whatever it was. I didn't care. I wanted him to get the rhythm and the cadence and the poetry and the storytelling down pat. Now he's 3 years old, and if I tell him, if he's misbehaving, guess what? You're not getting a book tonight. Like, it's like, you might as well tell him that, he can't enjoy life anymore, because that's his connection to stories. And I kind of take it upon myself to be that active as a parent, but I don't think that's far beyond the parents who have boys who are, well in the 6, 7, 8-year-old camp. I mean, my youngest nephew, who will be turning 9, is very much into video games, is very much into screens. But we've just discovered now that he's really into war stories. And he's gotten into this series of World War II stories for kids, and Vietnam for kids, and the Korean War, and all of these different things. So there is an opportunity there to really just kind of penetrate the barrier that has been created by the standard media culture, and really like plant a flag to say, hey, there's other stuff here. There's a whole other world of wonder and thrilling stories that we can show to our kids. So I very much think that the gates are down. I very much think the opportunity is now, and I'm willing to die on that hill, quite frankly.
And if I can just build on what Frank said too, I mean, like, it's very, for us, it's very intentional that we have this connection for us between what we're doing and these kind of pulp stories of yesteryear, which are not necessarily like the fodder that I want for my 8-year-old, right? I'm not like pulling Conan off the shelf for him just yet, right? But I will say, when you go back and look at these pulps, which at the time were, they're so awful and lurid and terrible, and they're so lowbrow, but you read them now, we're reading Lovecraft, and even Conan Doyle at some points was kind of smeared that way, and who else am I missing? Robert E. Howard and these guys. We're reading them now as like high art compared to what we're doing right now. And if you read them, the content itself is not so much lurid as just intensely masculine.
Correct.
And so the connection I try and make to people, and I did an essay for Pulp, Pipe, and Poetry about Helldivers, which is Helldivers 2, which both of those games are very good, very big in my catalog of like games that I think of very fondly, and games that I'm currently introducing to my son. And what's interesting about Helldivers is it's intentionally pulling from all of these pulp tropes that came from books, from Robert Heinlein and Starship Troopers and others, right? And it's intentionally pulling from those and integrating that kind of storytelling into a video game media. And guess what? Now that I've played Helldivers side by side with my son, where we're going to war together and strategizing about the different armaments we're going to bring to bear against our enemies, guess how easy it's going to be when he's 12 or 14 to hand him Starship Troopers and say, "Go to town, buddy," right? The crossover is right there. And I will, say it maybe not kindly, but look, it's not that boys don't like to read. It's that the books that you guys are shoving to them suck. Like, I'm sorry. Like, if you've got young men who just don't want to read your stuff, let's go ahead and check what you're asking them to read. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times there's this thought process that, we can just kind of hand them this stuff that is, I'm sorry, if your book's boring, dudes are going to check out. If your book, in fact, they're a pretty good test of whether or not your book has a good pace, is if you can't have an off chapter with a little guy. He's like, nah, I got better stuff to do. If your book's boring, if your book talks down to him, if your book doesn't treat him like a real moral agent that can think deeply about the world, even at his level, he wants to be challenged. Mm-hmm. He wants to think about things like conflict. He wants to be scared a little bit. Those are all things that are a part of that young male literature. And that doesn't mean that girls don't like those kinds of books too. My goodness, I read, Chronicles of Narnia aloud, and both of my kids enjoy, all of my kids enjoy it. But they take different things away from that book. And I think really we've gotten out of touch with what makes a book compelling for a young man. And so I don't think we should be surprised that they've gotten out of touch with books. The way back is very easy. I think we just have to stop being so frankly, we have to stop being so elitist and silly about the way back. If we're going to insist that the way back for these young men is the exact way that it was for us, or the kinds of books that we think are highbrow enough for them, well, it's going to be a challenge. But you know what I've found? If you pop an audiobook in for your kids of something that they really vibe with and get excited about, It's actually really easy
And
for them to get into it. You just have to be willing to flex a little bit and make a connection to what is something that's important to them.
And I will add just a quick footnote to that. I think what really summarizes my entire or our philosophy on this and why we wanted to bring this book to market is to demonstrate for not just our boys and our children, but to young men everywhere and to young fathers as well. The word we're trying to really drill down here is agency. It's this sense of just, yes, you can do things. You can go, I mean, which has kind of come the meme now, but I mean, it's, you can go out and take charge. You don't have to be passive towards life. You can have a very active, fulfilling life. You can have an active role in society. You can just get up and go out and go forth. That's what we're trying to really drill home, I think.
Well said. And I agree. I have a 6-year-old, and the name Tintin was brought up by Zack earlier. That's my son Leo's current thing. He's reading Tintin every night by himself in his bed. I don't know to what extent he's reading it. I know he's looking at the pictures, certainly. But in Tintin, there's like a lot of prose in Tintin. It's like a comic book, but if you look at the text boxes, they're like much larger than like a modern comic book. And there are adult themes in Tintin that sometimes offend modern sensibilities. But my little 6-year-old boy, he's like totally obsessed. And so, I mean, to me, like there's one kid, and you guys are telling me that there are others that are into this sort of thing, which it makes me think there's certainly a market. Well, one of the bright spots is indie publishing. We could complain about, how Hollywood doesn't produce the kind of things that we want to see. Or my understanding is that I'm not a big video game guy, but my understanding is video games had the Gamergate thing or whatever. Like publishing fiction is a very nimble thing. So like anyone can do it. In fact, I am doing it, and I am anyone. So anyone now can publish quite easily. And so I think it's like a nimble medium where you can go out and find the thing that you want or even produce it yourself. Do you guys want to riff on that? Like just your thoughts on just the opportunity in independent publishing? I'll just say one more thing. In my orbit, there was a nonfiction book that has made a lot of waves, and it's Saifedean Ammous, The Bitcoin Standard. This book, I think he sold over 1 million of these, at least, and it's converted a lot of people into Bitcoin and made a lot of people a lot of money. It's independently published now. I was trying to think of the most prominent fiction book that I've read that's independently published. I think it's The Martian by Andy Weir, which is good. It's good. It's probably very not good. As good as the movie, but it's a very good, very readable piece of fiction. But what are your independent publishing? Where is the opportunity? Do you guys agree with my thoughts on just the kind of the nimbleness of the medium?
Yeah, I mean, I can go head first into this, but I mean, from a historical perspective, the idea of independent publishing somehow being this new age thing that is embraced fully in the year of our Lord 2025 is frankly rubbish. Like Edgar Allan Poe self-published. Edgar Allan Poe was trying to raise money to do his magazine, and he couldn't. Except back in those days, you had to physically crank your books out. You know what I mean? Clark Ashton Smith, who was not really regarded well during his day, with a lot of his prose poems and a lot of his short stories and a lot of his more fantasy stories. Like most of his stuff was self-published as well. I think now to the point that you're bringing up, Andy. Yeah, I think independent publishing is the way to go. I think if you have a story, if you have a message, if you have something that you're wishing to say, all on you, my friend. Like that's kind of like you're in the perfect opportunity now where no one's really going to bat an eye. I mean, the quality of covers, the quality of editing, for all the stuff that you're getting out into the marketplace. I mean, forget AI for a second. A lot of it kind of really rivals the stuff that's coming out of, the big 5 publishers in New York. And it's now the better time to really go out and publish. I almost feel bad for the MFA folks. And then I know I tend to pick on them. I almost feel bad for them. And I almost feel bad for those who are trying to do things the old-fashioned way of traditional publishing. I mean, I know some friends who are also big hybrid publishers who publish independently and publish with small presses. That's all well and dandy. But for those that are really just selling off rights to Simon & Schuster, who are really selling off rights to Penguin Random House, who are really just waiting to publish in their books, and some of these god-awful contracts, what are you waiting for? Like, what is the excuse? I mean, those folks are not really my target audience, but for the pulp work ethic and for a lot of the historical pulp articles that I was producing, part of the intent of that was just to put, again, the sense of agency and urgency among new writers is just to go forth and do. There are no rules when it comes to real fiction writing. As H. Bedford Jones, a Canadian-born American pulp writer, would say, there really are no rules. Like, you can go forth and do. So I think now, in terms of independent publishing, what you will see, yes, you're going to see, the floodgates have now been fully opened. You're going to see an absolute wave of stuff. Some of it's going to be okay. Some of it's going to be not great. Some of it's going to rise to the crop, but rise to the top. But cream is cream, and cream will always rise to the top. And that's not for us as contemporaries to decide what will stand the test of time 10, 20, 30, 100 years from now. That's not our job. Our job is to simply write, publish, and release. That's my whole attitude as a writer, as an independent writer. I would never even dream of trying to woo an agent or trying to woo a big name publisher in my life, because the stories that I even write as a short story writer are so off kilter and so out there, making fun of the whole corporate HR safetyism world that we live in. Like, no big five publisher is going to want to publish that stuff. And I think you just have this sense of freedom as a creative and as an artist to really just own the process. And, I will, again, that's another hill that I'm going to die on. Of course, you're free to do your own thing. Like, don't take what I say as a kind of dagger for your dreams if you're trying to really gain favor with the big five. Like, have at it, do your own thing. But I just think now, especially for what we're talking about here as the gentleman of this podcast on the Gentleman Speculator, I think now is just like the perfect time to go out and publish the books that you want to Zach's point, to publish the books that you want to read.
Well, and you have a historical playbook already, right? Which is like the stuff that we talk about as, the pulps, right? Well, they were called the pulps because they were printed on pulp, like really crappy, low-grade paper, because these guys couldn't get printed in the snooty magazines and everybody, they didn't want their stuff. So they went out and ripped it themselves and did it. And pretty soon there was an appetite for it. And people went down and found this material because they wanted something that was exciting. They wanted something that was killer and that they got into, right? It created this whole industry. Well, that's always how publishing especially has operated. It operates from a bottom-up thing. The demand drives the scrappy, nasty, weird kind of stuff that then gets cleaned up, dusted off, and then it gets sent out and published in these like nicer presses, right? By the time you've got your Heinleins and all these guys doing or even past that, I'd say your Frank Herberts and stuff doing these culturally acceptable science fiction stories, they're building on generations of guys who've been just slinging this garbage into like cheap magazines, and they're taking it and cleaning it up and working it. The beauty of the written word, and I think it's pretty credible, I would argue that we're entering kind of this like new renaissance of the written word. Why? Because every other art form has become so expensive and so corporate and so difficult for you to break into. I hate to tell you, but you're not going to make a movie. Most of you who are listening to this, you're just not. It's insanely expensive and it's very gate kept. You're probably not going to make music at a really huge, impactful level, because that's also very expensive now and very gate kept. But guess what? If you've got a computer or a phone, you can publish. You can. You and Substack can publish right now. Well, I know because we've done it for about 2 years. You can also publish it on Amazon as a book, and literally nobody can stop you. And to have the ability to, from the bottom up, push written culture in the direction you want with almost zero barrier to entry and very little risk, means that you get to be the vanguard of whatever artistic movement you're interested in. And it should start, to me, from that lower level of short stories, periodicals, and books, because it's so easy to get across. Once you create that artistic momentum, then you build something that's interesting enough aesthetically and from a viewpoint that all of a sudden people say, well, that's a really cool way to think about things. What if we did that as a TV show or as a movie? Yeah. But you don't start from the top down, right? And it's one of the reasons why, and this is just a personal bugbear that I see in the indie publishing community, everybody is just spending all their time complaining and whining and griping about, well, Disney's doing this and traditional publishing's doing that, and they're doing, yeah, that's what they do, man. They're corporate. They've got bottom lines and they've got shareholders. Like they're not going to be the ones taking, like Frank said, these crazy risks on bizarre new forms of stuff. That's never how it works. If you want to move the needle culturally and you're interested in a new kind of thing, you've got to be the one doing it at the grassroots level, and then you've got to be patient.
Yes.
And wait, all these, like I said, the artists that do crazy, groundbreaking things are, at that top, huge cultural level. They're always building on the shoulders of people. George Lucas doesn't do what he's doing without generations of artists making it palatable for people to show up and watch him try something. And a lot of those artists are people that, people wouldn't come bring their kids to watch their movies. Let's just put it that way. So you've got to be kind of willing to push it a little bit. And I can't think of a better time to do that now that we have so many tools. I mean, I'm sitting in my church office right now, which is where I work, my day job. And we've publishing books for our pastor. He's writing books at a crazy clip and just throwing them up on Amazon. And then once you throw them up on Amazon, you realize, well, if we have our own website, we can have a nicer, margin and we can get them directly to people. And it's really so easy. And the crazy thing that's starting to happen with KDP is pop open some of the books on your bookshelf and check and see if they aren't already going in this direction.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see a very interesting move by people that are stealth dropping independent books. And it's now getting harder and harder for you to kind of notice if a book isn't officially coming through these official channels, because people are realizing why, like Frank said, why would I give up all of my control, all of my artistic ability to make this what I want, all of my rights, usually for these contracts, a huge chunk of my profits, for the chance to maybe have the book be in somebody's portfolio where they may not market it, and I might not get another chance to publish it or do other things with it later on down the line. It's just not really a good bet right now.
And to that effect, being the writer in 2025, you are a business entity on yourself, albeit a small one. You're no different than an entrepreneur. Like all of the tools, all of the capabilities, all of the avenues for you to publish, whether it be Substack, KDP, Draft to Digital, and all these other places that can push out your message and push out your work out there. Once you have done enough to cultivate a fan base, like a solid, loyal, gung-ho fan base that is willing to, march out in the streets for you practically at the snap of fingers, like you now control your own little niche marketplace. And you don't have to be beholden to Amazon. You don't have to be beholden to anything in a corporate setting if you don't want to. Like you can make a comfortable living, and I still believe this today. You can make a comfortable living if you do all the right things and you stick with fiction. It's not a get rich quick scheme at all, and it's not something that I would ever implore someone to go make fast money. Unlike all these AI folks who are just pumping all of this stuff and all this garbage. But the point that I'm trying to make here is like, if you can keep a 9-to-5 or a part-time work or whatever the case may be and write in your own capacity, like Kafka, like the other great writers there. And, your work may not be regarded or even looked at or even, celebrated in your lifetime. But it doesn't have to be. And that's not your job. Your job as the artist is to communicate and express your art and put it out there in the marketplace. The marketplace will do whatever it will ever do. And, it's, many artists who were not celebrated in their lifetime that 20, 50 years after their death are now part of the canon. They're now part of the cultural scene. So you never really know where your stuff's going to end up. I still get very nice letters, very nice direct messages from people who still comment on the pulp work ethic, who still comment on some of these old articles that I've written, about 2-3 years ago. from all places, places I've never been. You know, I've never been to India. I've never been to Belgium. I've never been, but I still get very nice notes from people who say, it was this article that inspired me to write. I am now publishing mine. I know plenty of people online even who are now writing regularly because of the work that was published. So you never know where any of your stuff will end up and what the ripple effect will be. But that's the beauty of the world we're in now. You are free to publish what you want, when you want, at whatever pace you want. You want to be a modern day pulp writer? By all means. You want to publish 2 books a year and keep a 9 to 5 and be a part of your family life? You are free to do that. There is nothing stopping you.
I was definitely the kid who reads. I was the guy in my room in the summer that my dad had like to pull the book away to go play outside with my brother. And I would say at this point, I'm now reading more than ever just because it's a lot easier. I can listen to audiobooks. I can probably read a little bit faster on the Kindle, and I still read physical books. So I'm consuming this in all sorts of different ways. But I would say like there's still like this, especially for boys, like there's still like this tactile nature to physical books that makes like that segment. It makes a lot of sense to produce a cool physical book for a boy. So yeah, the Lindy staying power of sort of the physical paperback or even the physical hardcover. I think it makes a lot of sense, especially for boys, and it's easier than ever to produce it. Let's talk about the boys book, the boys book of adventure anthology. I've read the book. I would say, you said middle grade earlier. I would say there's a couple middle grade stories in there, mine included, and then some of them maybe are probably a little bit older, maybe YA or even like for young men. So I don't know about you guys. I would say it sort of spans a spectrum of boys. Besides my own, I would say my favorite stories are The Little War by Blake Babechko.
Yep.
Just a very charming, it's kind of like a vibe, and it's just about the difference between how boys and girls play. I liked the weird one called Mac and the Mentioners by Harvey Stanbro. It's kind of like a Twilight Zone sort of story where I didn't totally know what was going on until the end. I was like, oh, this is what he's doing. Mm-hmm. And then, but I would say my favorite story in the boys' book of adventure is Young Chase Baker and the President's Assassin by Vincent Zandri. And I really love this one. It's, everyone's trying to recreate the Indiana Jones vibe to some extent.
Yeah.
the GOAT, Indiana Jones. And I would just say like the writing in this is just so effortless, and you guys put it right before my story. So you read this one and then you go to my story and it's like, oh, we see the master, and then we see what Flattery's doing. But it's just like, a boy and his buddy, and they're fighting, and then they get into the caper together. And then you've got the boy and his dad, and you've got a Pizza Hut, and you've got, a bit of a treasure hunt of sorts.
A trip down the 80s, as Vin would say. It's definitely.
Yeah. It's totally the 80s vibe. I'm an old millennial, so that resonated with me. So those are my 3 favorites. But Zach, what say you about the boys' book of adventure anthology?
Yeah, I think that what was really cool about what we got to do is I didn't place fiction in this one. I put an essay in, just kind of trying to give us like this idea of what we're going for here, right? Like and I don't, but what was really cool about the anthology is we've got all these different guys hitting at it from all these different directions. And like you said, the tones of the stories are different. Maybe even the age bracketing is different, but you can see how quickly, it was not a difficult sell to pitch this. We said Frank says the email around, it's like, hey, this is kind of what I'm going for. And nobody was sitting there racking their brains like, what could I possibly, everybody's like, oh, immediately.
Yeah.
And you can see there's, I've got, and if I don't have one, I'll get you one in a week. Right.
Yeah.
And what I think is cool about that is there's a sense of reconnection with your kind of childhood self of what would have gotten me going? What did I like?
Yep.
And there is a bit of a like a handing on of the torch element of this, because we're trying to inspire the same kind of enjoyments and the same kind of desires that we had as kids in our sons, our nephews, the young men that we connect to, right? And so I think it's you're getting connected with what inspired you, but you're also then kind of training and curating in a sense for this next generation. And yeah, man, this is the kind of stuff that I want them into. You know what I mean? And it reminds me of the very same kind of, like you said, maybe some of it's more of a YA, but it's like you mentioned for Tintin, man. If you're going to get books that are going to excite young guys, there's got to be a little bit of a sense that they probably shouldn't be reading it. Like that's what gets them into it, right? There's got to be some stuff that they read where they're like, dang, I don't think mom's going to like to see that, right? Because that's part of it for young men. It's a testing mechanism of, oh, this is a little more mature than I feel ready for even. That's good. Like that's what pushes them, helps them think about the world, helps them encounter different ideas, and whether it's, a lot of these are kind of coming from a more adventure fiction, kind of straight ahead adventure fiction mindset. We've got a little bit of your sci-fi, fantasy type stuff, all that. Big hallmarks of that that's all squarely that genre fiction. Yeah. And a lot of genre is using conflict and heightened stakes and maybe even a little bit of, violence and stuff to get you to question yourself and kind of question the world a little bit. And I'm excited to get it and kind of take it home, throw it on the shelf and see when my son kind of notices it and fix it up.
Yeah, that's a good point about the tactile books. I remember doing that. I remember just like being a kid and just like browsing the shelves and, I just picked something up. I remember when I was like very young, I don't know, 10 or 11, I read like a 400-page biography of Al Capone, the gangster. Well, I don't know why I read that, but I remember
Heck
that.
Yeah, dudes rock.
In fact, I'm working on another of my Adventure of Leo and Henry books right now, and Al Capone is a character in the story.
Excellent.
It's like a historical character in the story. But I remember, like, why is a boy picking up these random things in the shelf? That's what boys will do for sure.
Yeah, and I just to kind of echo off of, I've been in sales for 8 years, so I could sell this book till the cows come home. But part of the whole intention of this is to showcase what boys fiction is and what boys fiction can do. And to the point that you both have made earlier, boys are going to go through things. There's an intuitive nature to they're just going to pick something up, and whether it's a cover, whether it's a line, whether it's a setting, whatever, what have you, they're going to say, ooh, this is different. This is interesting. This is something that's going to like really grab them by the collar of their shirt and just like pull them into the story. Like that's what we're wanting. And I will say there are about a few it's always fun to be the editor to kind of see the writer's process behind the scenes. And I won't say much to this effect, but I will say that some of these stories, especially some of the ones that you mentioned earlier, Andy, were written completely to order. I had guys tell me, oh, I got something. And then later on when I read it and I said, this is great, we're going to accept it. It goes, can I be honest with you? Like I literally wrote that like within the last 4 hours. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the pulp work ethic in play. So it's a perfect mesh between what has come before and what we're trying to do now in the modern day. And that's really what it's all about. And I think the magic and the beauty and really the ethos of the boys' adventure book is to just show them what they can do and give them that aspirational quality, give them stories of wonder, give them thrilling stories. And to kind of call back to times of history, Edgar Rice Burroughs received a letter from a young boy, I'd probably say third, fourth grade maybe, a school-age boy nonetheless, received a letter saying that his teacher tried to dissuade him from picking up an Edgar Rice Burroughs book, Tarzan probably, saying that it was not suitable literature for someone like him and that he should read someone real of whoever the contemporary was at the time. And Edgar Rice Burroughs actually wrote back to him and he says, you're right, it's not suitable literature. And all my hundreds of millions of readers and fans would probably agree with you and probably have some words to say to your teacher about the effect of how my books are not considered literary, they're not considered highbrow, but they are resonating with the intended market. And I think part of the beauty of that and part of the beauty of making it a showcase of short stories is that, I always try to introduce new readers, people who've never read, people who are late bloomers to reading, people who don't read for pleasure, people who picked up The Great Gatsby in high school and said, I'm never reading another fiction book ever again. Those, I start them off with short stories. I do the same thing with my nephews. I start you off with a short story because it gives you a little bit of a taste. Maybe Celtic fantasy, sword fiction is not your cup of tea. Perhaps 80s Indiana Jones adjacent is. You get to test the wheels, and we have to kind of trust boys to kind of figure out what feels right, what's going to resonate with them, and I think there is something to be said about treating middle grade or treating young boys with that sense of respect to figure out a little bit of like what is going to be a part of their taste, what is something that's going to really pull them in and gravitate them. And if that one story out of the 9 stories we have in this collection is the gateway drug for them reading fiction and reading Edgar Rice Burroughs or H. Rider Haggard or Louis L'Amour, I've done my job.
That's why I think it's so silly to kind of ring the gong on short stories, because you can't have it both ways, right? Either the young guys are so technology addled and their brains are so fried by whatever that they don't have any very good attention span. Okay, great. Then we should be giving them short stories. Correct. That's what's cool about a short story is the ultimate exercise in, if you can't get to the cool in the first page, and get the heck out, right? Because you don't have much time, and with a short story that's good, you better grab me by the collar and say, this is what's going to be freaking cool about this. And that's exactly how you should write for boys anyway. One of my favorite, I don't think he was even intending it in this way, but one of my favorite pieces of creative advice that I've ever gotten was from a YouTuber who does stuff for, he's a Dungeons and Dragons YouTuber. It goes by Runehammer. And one time people were asking him, how do you get ideas for these different things that you do? And he writes as well. He has some actually very good independently published novels. And he said, I sit down and I ask myself, what do I want to happen so bad that it just has to exist? He said, and that's that I start with that. That's the next thing I do. And he said, and then I say, okay, now what do I want to happen so bad? What is the thing that must happen? He said, I write down my 10 ideas, and then I pick my 3 favorite ones, and I stuff them into the first page.
Yeah.
Because this idea that, this literary fiction idea that everything's got to take all this long time and it's got to be super boring for most of it. Okay. I mean, I've read books like that. They can be fine, but boys, that's not going to hack it for boys. And so what's cool about this style even of writing is it forces you to almost do that stream of consciousness thing of, yeah, man, what is my hitters? What is the best ideas that I've got? What is going to immediately grab this young guy and make him go, hey, dude, you're going to like this. No, I promise you, this is going to be cool, right? And that's kind of the way of storytelling that you've got to get yourself, the mentality you've got to get yourself into. And shockingly enough, when you go back to these old stories that boys used to love, that's exactly how the stories were told. I did a piece for Based Boys on a super unknown, Oliver Optic was the pen name that he went by. And he had this series called The Young Engineers that are filled with insane things to write about young men or to show young men doing, like owning and operating a small joint stock railroad. Just absolutely so much fun. Those books are killer. You've got to get a hold of them. Probably harder to get a hold of nowadays, but I think they're online on like Gutenberg. And I similar hilarious pull quote on that I found for the story was that Louisa May Alcott of Little Men fame. Mm-hmm. So I love Louisa May Alcott. She's a wonderful author, but she was quoted as saying that the author's books, she said that they were not suitable for young men because the cast of characters were, I forget the specific words that she used. I think it was basically like there was too many hooligans and ruffians and like, street toughs in the stories. And I remember kind of reading that and being like, oh yeah, that is why they're really good. Like you've got to kind of find that little bit of childlike, like, cool kind of moment. And that's the stuff that hooks your young guys in. You got it. That's why when they read Tintin and it's all of the best, it's like shaking the big box of cool ideas and getting the 3 best that fall out and mashing them all together. It doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't have to be the most highbrow result. It just has to be the biggest ratio of cool ideas per page that you can kind of possibly fit in there. And I think that short stories, especially anthos, really work well for that. I love the experience. I've got some of my favorite pieces of fiction I've ever read have been coming across a short story in an otherwise pretty, mediocre anthology and just having it take the top of my head off. Yeah. I've never thought about that idea. That's the most bizarre way to approach that I've ever heard. Man, that trick that he pulled, like those are really cool experiences because the barrier to entry is low. You're not investing so much time in any individual story. And authors tend to really want to bring their A game because you don't have a lot of space. You don't have a lot of time. You got to cut all the fat out. So I honestly, I think it's kind of a perfect form factor.
Yeah, you mentioned the hooligans comment. I did an episode on Edward Stratemeyer, and on my desk here, I have like a stack of Hardy Boys books, of different eras. And Edward Stratemeyer was selling directly to boys.
Yep.
So like his customers were boys that were buying these for dimes or nickels or however much the books cost 100 years ago. And it strikes me that now the customers are not boys. The customers are probably parents or schools or libraries. So that is probably part of the reason why there's like not as much cool stuff in these books. You could get super conspiratorial and say that like the man is against boys or something like that. And, the wokeness and all this sort of thing, perhaps, obviously I think there's probably something there. However, when you think about it, if your customer is the parents, maybe you think, well, it should probably be like super educational and they have to learn something. Yeah. Or if it's schools, it's like I can write a boys book, but it's got to say something about like history or whatever. Mm-hmm. Like and those books, some of those books are really good. I'm not like knocking that. Yeah. But if your customer is the boys themselves, then it's like, how do I just make this awesome? Like, how do I make this something that the boy is going to want to read?
Yeah. I mean, you brought up Edward Stratemeyer, former pulp writer, or really somewhere between dime novelist and pulp writer, who was just cranking out tons and tons of work and then saw the opportunity and decided, hey, let's hire a bunch of ghostwriters and write Nancy Drew stories and write Hardy Boy stories. And he understood his market. I mean, the man really was a genius. I mean, I've cover to cover devoured the Stratemeyer Institute book, and just in part of my own like research, and the man just knew, like he had the right instincts, both not just as a former pulp novelist or pulp writer, but also as just a businessman, and just blending the two of just really feeding a marketplace that was absolutely hungry for it. I think in terms of my intention of the boys anthology. Yes, we're in a different time, right? We're in an era where really safetyism is just kind of like the new craze thing in like the past decades of things, where we can't put anything that's got too much edge in it. You know what I mean? And I don't have an answer for how we kind of combat that. Maybe we don't. I think one of the things that really stand the test of time in terms of a marketing tool is really word of mouth and just community-driven, community-oriented buying books. I mean, you talked about, the homeschool community. Like, that's absolutely one of the marketplaces that I want to kind of drive home to. And yeah, you're going to have the homeschool moms, nothing against homeschool moms, that are, may pump the brakes a little bit to kind of bring certain pieces of literature home that is marketed towards boys. But I think something that independent artists really need to do a better job at, that corporations and studio heads and all these other folks that are really trying to do paint by numbers marketing and really just kind of do art by committee and just package up a factory piece of work and just hopefully get oodles and oodles of cash in response. Word of mouth, when something trends, when something hits a certain group that has a certain shared amount of values that are looking for this, that are like the Zack Grafmans of the world, that have in their communities, in their churches, in their homeschool communities, in their neighborhoods, in their neck of the woods, when they find something, never underestimate those guys, those fathers, those pastors that really find things like everyone needs to read this. Like I don't care, like we need to add some of the budget to like buy some of these books and include it in our library. I full-heartedly believe that that's not only possible and doable, but I think that's what's going to happen in this new renaissance of independent publishing, is that the ones that are intended for the book will find that book and spread it to their other friends, because that's really where we're at in a post-COVID world where we're starved for community. And what's the one thing that people do in community? They exchange books, they exchange movies, they try to hook each other up about, the new thing that has caught their interest. Same thing with music and everything else like that. We're in this era of kind of really starting underground fiction, if you will, that just spreads like a wildfire. And I think that's totally doable and possible for not just the Boys Book of Adventure, but any sort of piece of literature that's now being published today.
Yeah, crate digging is back.
Yeah.
Like you used to, if you wanted to get good music, you'd have to know your friend who was a crate digger, right? He'd go into the LP store and he'd just be ripping through trying to find, and he knew, right? Like that guy knew he could put you on about like, this is what's good and not, right? Well, I think that we thought that when we went to this web model that was gone because, well, no, that there's so much advertisement, everything will be hyper targeted to you. But most of those targeting models are broke.
Yeah.
Like just not functional right now, not working at all for a number of reasons, right? And big corporations know this and they're panicking. So now they're in an effort to, and I'm not inventing any of this. This is all, freely available commentary that I'm just synthesizing. But like in an effort to try and fix that problem, they're flattening everything they can do out as thin as it can go so that it'll not offend anybody possible. So it'll be most widely marketable to everybody so that, a middle-aged person in literal China can enjoy it about as much as you over here can, right? Well, that's great for what it's worth. But what we're discovering is, exactly what happens now in the modern world. If you want to be interested in media, what happens? Well, the three of us jumped on a call, and what do we immediately do? Well, here's a book I really liked. I was super interested. We start swapping these things like they're drugs, right? Of like, dude, this is what I got, right? Like we're swapping these things around. That kind of underground, conspiratorial, vibes-based marketing is what drives stuff now. And I think it's a mistake to see that as like a also ran strategy or if that's the best you can do strategy. This information is like publicly available now. The insanely low numbers of anything that are selling. Pick your thing. Is music selling? No. Are movie tickets selling? Absolutely not. Books? Don't make me laugh. There's subpoenaed files from a major merger, I think, that was supposed to go on between some of the big five, where they basically had to publicly admit that the average book that they publish sells in the hundreds. Or, don't quote me, but you can go look at all this. It's pitiful what their average sellers are. That means that, man, if yes, we're talking about, your target addressable market is really low. Okay, but so is everybody's. Mm-hmm. And so if I get a book out there that a bunch of, whoever really vibes with me, if they really vibe with it, and they tell all of their friends, you got to have this. This is the thing we've been excited about. This is the thing I've been missing. Like, get your kids this. If that's the book that they're buying for birthday parties and just like passing around, you already have a way better marketing engine than Penguin Random House does.
Yeah.
Like, you're actually beating them on the ground game, which is pretty crazy to say, but I'm relatively confident that that's starting to actually be accurate.
Crate digging is back. Do you guys have a minute on that note? Do you guys have a minute to stay on and give a recommendation?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I'm curious if you have a recommendation, either like maybe something you're reading to your son right now, or any favorite boys' books of your own. When you were a lad, as you're thinking of it, the one that I'm going to recommend is there's I've never heard anybody talk about this book, so that's why I'll bring it up. I'll do some crate digging. And it's a book called The Wings of a Falcon by Cynthia Voigt. It's from the 80s. You guys remember this one all?
No.
Okay. It's got an awesome cover. So if you look it up, it's like, part of like the cover does sell the book. And I just bring it up. I don't know where I got it, but it was one of those that I read like multiple times. Mm-hmm. And it's like sort of a medieval fantasy, except I don't think there was any magic in it. And the idea was a teenage boy and his best friend are in a medieval prison for boys, and they escape. And then they go on a coming of age journey. And at the end, I think spoiler alert, I think they come back around and break out all the other boys. So that was one that I probably read when I was 12. So it's sort of in that realm. And, I have like the list of stuff I'll share with the boys when they're old enough. But, Zach, what about you?
We already mentioned Henty. I already mentioned Oliver Optic. Those are both really good and pretty, just, they're not very well known nowadays. We talked about Landmark a little bit. Gosh, man, you've been, what's a really deep pull that I can I can pull out. I'll say this doesn't seem like a deep pull, but I don't find you've got to get, if you've got a 10-year-old boy or right around there, you've got to get them on Treasure Island.
Mm-hmm.
And I think everybody thinks they know Treasure Island because you've watched any number of really good movie adaptations, including my personal favorite, Muppet Treasure Island, the best. Yeah. Don't at me. But you think that you like know this story and whatever. You have got, first of all, Robert Louis Stevenson's a genius. Second of all, I wrote a whole essay about how this book is like aesthetically really good for boys because it teaches you the kind of writing that you should be into. It's insanely like tactile. Everything about his book is like, this is how it feels, how it smells, how it sounds. The writing has a rhythm to it. It's very high craft writing. And it's like turbo based, man.
Was it the original boys book? Like, is there it's
got to be in there, right? Like, because it's what I think is cool about it is it has a foreword in the original edition. It has a foreword where he basically says, look, like, he kind of almost apologizes, like some of this maybe some people might not like, but I'm trusting that like young lads are going to pick this up and be down with it because I know what they love. Yes. And so it's coming from this place of love, which I talked about even in the essay and the Base Boys thing. It's like, that's how you know you're writing for young men, is you've got to love young men. Right. You've got to have a heart for like what they want and need. And that's where you're going to do a good job. He crushes that. This is a story about like a kid who's 10 or 12 years old who, you know, no spoilers, but like basically his little tiny family, he's protecting his mom from violent threats by totally no good dudes, ends up going on an incredibly dangerous adventure with a bunch of adults, is integral at a number of points to saving a bunch of people's life, shoots a guy in the face. Like it's not a book about a kid staying home and kind of figuring out fifth grade. It's hardcore stuff. It's about murderers and terrible people. But there's deep moral conflict to this story about, hey, you young man are going to meet people that will manipulate you and use you and prey on your naivety so that they can take things from you. Don't let that happen. It's wild how much is in that story that we don't remember. And it's also a very good lesson in, you know, is the vocabulary for modern kids? Heck no. Are there going to be parts that are going to be a little bit slow for them? Absolutely. Did I read it to my kids and they groaned every time I pulled it out? 100%. But by the time they got to the end, they were interested in some of it. They were saying, oh, well, now I kind of understand how that works with the ship and stuff. And like, sometimes you got to be willing to kind of shoot a little high. Yeah. And especially if you've got even a moderately well-read 10 or 12-year-old, man, let them rip. It's a wonderful story.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That was the correct recommendation. Frank, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a specific recommendation other than what I read to my son. And right now we are starting The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood, the good old illustrated classics. We finished, when did we finish?
How old is your son?
Oh, he's 3. But he absorbs so much. And like he doesn't care really what the story is as long as it's not boring. So, I mean, you really can't go wrong with some of these great illustrated classics. We just finished some of the Bible stories edition, like David and Goliath. I mean, that's just like that. His whole thing is like, wait, what happened to the giant? I'm like, oh, buddy. Like, that's his whole thing. And then, you know, from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, like I got him an entire, I say him, it was really for me, but it's an entire box haul of just all these great illustrated classics that he'll probably be, you know, 8 by the time we like comb through all of this stuff for him to really absorb it. But for him, it's just like, he's like, Dad, tell me a story. Like literally, I'll drive him to daycare and he'll say, Dad, tell me a story. It's already ingrained in the process that he's understanding the mechanics of story. And it's even still like, if he asks me a story to tell him, just even making one up, I mean, on the spot, if I come back not having remembered anything that I told him and he goes, wait, that's not what happened. This is what happened. Like his recall is so good. And I think just having this habit of reading him a variety of stories, he really wants to get into the Three Musketeers, because I did show him parts of the Disney 1993, Chris O'Donnell, Oliver Platt, Charlie Sheen, Kiefer Sutherland. He loves the adventure stories. Like every time we come home, he's like, let's fight with swords. Like he's getting into that habit. He's getting into that space. And I think to just kind of touch upon the little bit of, you know, what Zack was saying about just aiming slightly higher than they're probably ready for. And I don't remember, Zach, you could probably correct me. I don't remember if it was C.S. Lewis or G.K. Chesterton for that matter. But the whole quote, and you guys probably know what I'm going to say, the whole quote about allowing kids to know that evil stuff happens, that it's a dangerous world, and giving them stories of like how they can combat that evil, how they can confront that evil, how they can be armed to tackle it head on is important. And I know I'm butchering the whole thing, but like you,
I think you just messed up a C.S. Lewis quote, Frank. No, you're right. You're totally right.
But you get exactly what I'm saying. Like the cusp of that attitude, I totally embody. So I never, perhaps I'm more loosey-goosey than other fathers. Perhaps I am, mea culpa. But I mean, my whole thing is like, I want my son to know and to recognize that not everything of the world is really sunshine and rainbows. And I think there's a tactful way to introduce him that type of conflict. There's a tactful way to introduce to him, these are the stories of good men doing good things for those that cannot defend themselves. And I think there are worse things to teach one's son, honestly.
Andy, didn't you were you the one that posted on Subsite Notes the other day one of the pictures from one of those great illustrated classics, the Robin Hood one?
Yeah, so I got a couple of these right here. This one is called The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood by Robert Pyle, and the illustrator is Don Irwin.
Okay.
And then I got another one, which I think you're referring to, and this might be the one, Frank, you just held up. This is The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood by Howard Pyle. Yep. And it's illustrated by, what does it say here? Pablo Marcos. And this one's awesome. It's a pocket book.
Yeah.
And my boys, they do like the pictures. So there's a picture on every page of this one. So
that's I think what made those so good is that they're bowdlerized, it's like super abridged, and they're just a kid's version, but it gets you into it. And I had a Ratatouille moment when you post, you know what I'm talking about, where you're the little sound effect goes whoa, and you like remember where you were standing as a kid when you posted that picture, because I remembered exactly that picture. And there's a lot of classics now in my life that I can remember those little, really rough, kind of sketchy black and white line drawings that were showing you, hey, dude, this is a cool story. And if you like this, you could read the whole one from, the Moby Dick and all that stuff. And I remember you posted that picture of, Little John longs for his friends, and like, what a bros vibe, you know what I mean? Of introducing these things to your kids. And I still 100% remember those. What a pull, Frank. I got to go back and dig those up now.
Well done, man. This has been great. Good to chat with you both. The Boys Book of Adventure Anthology, where can people find it? When is it coming out?
Oh, good question. Boys Book of Adventure is due to come out late August, early September, and they should be able to find it really wherever they can buy their books, whether it be Amazon KDP, Amazon Print, Barnes & Noble, and other bookstores as well.
Great. Man, great to chat with you. Let's do it again sometimes. And good luck with the book release. I am looking forward to see the launch.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you, Andy. This has been a pleasure.